The Department of State Service, DSS, confirmed the arrest of 7 Polish nationals in connection with a violent protest in Kano. The spokesperson of the DSS, Peter Afunaya, revealed this when the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Yusuf Tuga, held a meeting with members of the diplomatic corps on Wednesday. To that, let's get the perspective of Professor Mohammed Tokobaba, is the National Publicity Secretary, Arewa Consultative Forum. As we get his perspective on understanding the multifaceted impact of violent protest. Prof, good evening to you, sir. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Welcome to Politics Tonight. Prof, can you hear me, sir? Prof, good evening to you. Can you hear me? Thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you so very much. It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
All right, so let's kick off this conversation. The hashtag nationwide protest has brought about some conversations begging for answers, particularly our focus tonight, the violent cost of living protest, especially protection of rights for protesters and Nigerians who are not interested in protesting. Also talking about proportionality of response and accountability. But first, from your own perspective, can violent protest ever lead to positive change?
Not really. In general, if we learn from history, there are some countries, historical events where violent protests have led to changes. But in general, my answer is no. What cannot be achieved through negotiation, peaceful negotiation, can hardly be achieved by violence. Because violence, by its very nature, is self-destructive. It destroys those who are against, and it also destroys those who promote it. So in short, the answer is no, or at best you say it's doubtful, very doubtful.
So in holistically dissecting the violent nature of protest, can protest be completely non-violent? If so, why must we as a people most times employ violence as part of demonstrations?
Protests can be non-violent. Protests can be peaceful. There is what we call non-violent change. It can be achieved through negotiation. It can be achieved through agitation. It can be achieved through give and take, depending on how you plan it, of course. It often turns violent, one, due to inadequate articulation of the grievance points. 2, lack of leadership. 3, resources with which the protest or the change is being sought. There are a variety of reasons and variety of situations. It's difficult to generalize on just one aspect. But in our case, I would say, if I can jump your question, in our case, I think the protest points have not been adequately, they have not been adequately articulated. And of course, the leadership has been underground. It's not known what resources they had, how they could sustain the protest, and so on. So there are multiple factors to point out.
Absolutely. I mean, so stakeholders like you have said, when protests become violence, the outcomes are often divisive and can undermine the original message. But Prof, how would you describe the last few days in states like Zamfara, Plateau, Kaduna, and Kano State? Days of massive looting, destruction of private and public properties, and unfortunate death of a teenage protester, which has now been confirmed by the Director of Army Public Relations. Regrettable.
A few days to the planned protest, the Area Consultative Forum issued a statement expressing doubt about the wisdom behind the protest, pointing out that the issues have not been adequately articulated. Secondly, the preparations are doubtful. There was no leadership. There wasn't what we call resource mobilization about it. And we raised doubts as to whether this country, or any country for that matter, can stand a 10-day lockdown of the country. We also said there are a lot of other policy issues that needed attention that were not articulated in the reasons given. Some of the reasons given were, at best, nebulous, they were poorly conceived, and so on. So, and we also, most importantly, raised the problem, the potential for such a protest to go wrong. Especially, it could be used by criminals and other elements to turn what should be a peaceful protest into a violent one. In the event, this was exactly what happened. The looting, the destruction, the death, and all negative outcomes were completely unavoidable. They were completely avoidable. And steps should have been taken to stop that. And then the organizers, whoever they were, they should have thought twice about undertaking the protest. Given the level of, like I said, poor preparation, poor articulation of what the issues are, poor guidelines as what to do and what not to do, a liaison with the law enforcement agencies to ensure that intelligence is used to predict certain things. We think, all these things were played a part in turning the protest the way it turned out. Very unfortunate, very divisive, including death, and so on. They are all death, destruction, and, of course, injuries were regret, but someone should have thought of them. They were predictable.
But, Prof, are you surprised that despite our years of democratic dispensation, are you surprised that some Nigerians do not really understand the ripple effect of violent protest on infrastructure, the economy, or even day-to-day activities? But for the purpose of emphasis, I'd like to speak to the cost of violent acts in protest.
Yeah, I wouldn't say we are surprised. Like I said, we predicted this is what would happen. If you look at the totality of our situation, the grievances, the economic difficulties, and so on, it's easy to know that a protest would be some fuel to an already tense situation. And at the very least, care should have been taken into articulating and fashioning out a peaceful protest. Although, like I said, it's difficult under our circumstances to think that there can be peaceful protest, given the different dynamics at play and so on. And also that we have not exhausted consultation. We have not exhausted the grievance procedures that are already in place. For example, we saw no engagement with the governors directly by those who are aggrieved. We saw no engagement with law enforcement agencies, but most especially with legislators who are representatives of the people. It looked like the legislators were either standing by or they were simply kept away. There was no rigorous, so to speak, engagement with them as to the grievances and what could be done about them. So when you have this situation, it's a recipe for, so to speak, disaster, as we saw. And it's very, very regrettable.
All right. So we'll come back to whether or not the political class is doing enough. But looking at the kinds of videos we saw coming out of Kano State, Prof, do you worry about the future of these young teenagers who have been turned to prey in the hands of politicians? The videos we saw, those young boys as young as 6 and 7, we saw these young kids with foreign flags, which our security chiefs have termed as treasonable offense. Would you confidently say there are those who have exploited the situation for personal gain or to incite further violence?
Well, there was no doubt. A majority of those we saw protesting and destroying property, going on brigandature, it's doubtful if they even understood what was going on. You can say, for example, yeah, they know about the suffering, they know about the hunger, they know about the economic hardship. But as to the implications of taking this route to expressing these grievances, it's very doubtful if those people had an adequate understanding of what was at stake and what could be done, what could be achieved. A lot of the reasons advanced were simply utopian. Those small kids, if you check by my estimation, most of them were 16 to not more than 30. And there isn't, you shouldn't expect these people to have a full appreciation of what was possible, what could be done, and what is simply utopian. And that, it's, for them, it was an avenue to vent anger. It's an avenue to express rage and so on. But whether they appreciate that this will produce positive results is very, very doubtful. And of course, a lot of them wouldn't know they are being manipulated by whoever, politicians, criminal elements, or whatever. And like I said, it goes back to what I said earlier. There wasn't adequate preparation at all levels of society. Parents seem to have lost control. Government has not adequately, both state, federal, and to a little extent federal, local, they have not adequately mobilized the people, and there was no attention paid to the actual level of the grievances on part of the youth in particular. We needed to factor in the fact that when youth are angry, they are not given to reason. They are ruled more by the heart than by the head, as should have been the case. And of course, it shows a lot of weaknesses in our preparedness as a society. And the idea is we can do a lot better in mobilizing to utilize the opportunities given by the Constitution, by democracy. But democracy is not irresponsibility. Democracy should not and need not be destructive, because the very same thing you destroy will have to be rebuilt again with public funds. So what is the gain? Let me draw attention, for example, the Lord Resistance Army in Uganda has been waging an insurgency. But you know, one of their strategies is they do not destroy public infrastructure. In their reasoning, if in the event that they set up the society they desire, they will need these same public resources, these same facilities to develop the society further. I'm not saying rebellion is accepted. I'm not saying the Lord Resistance Army is correct. But I'm saying the strategy of not destroying anything has a lot of wisdom to it. What we have witnessed are destruction of private property, destruction of businesses, destruction of public property, and so on. And then, of course, on top of it all, the loss of life and the injuries. You ask yourself, were they actually necessary? Could they have achieved any reasonable desired objective? And the answer is, if you like, no. But if you want to be optimistic, we say very, very doubtful. It's a difference between 6.5 dozen, in my opinion.
So, Prof, how do you react to the arrest of 7 Polish nationals by the Department of State Service, DSS, in connection to the hoisting of foreign flags in the north? Does this speak to the vulnerability of the region or as a collective? And what would you blame this on? And in your opinion, what are the consequences of this on our sovereignty as a nation?
What the arrest is, as I expected, that is the duty of the state security services. This is what they are supposed to do on a constant basis, very dynamic to developments in the society. And it's not just that they were caught in the north. This could have been anywhere in the country. Let's face it, we don't need to regionalize it as such. It's bad. But we are happy that the state security services have been up and doing and have arrested these people. What needs to follow is thorough investigations. I mean, this is something that has taken me by surprise. But of course, I'm also happy, when we should be happy, that they have been apprehended. That, in my opinion, is a plus for our security agents, that they are not just sitting down, doing nothing about it. Like I said, what we need is thorough investigation of their involvement, so as to see what happened, what could have happened, and what needs to be done about it. And of course, if found culpable, they should be brought before the law in accordance with our own laws, not their own laws.
All right, Prof. I asked the question because of the reaction of Senator Shehu Sani, who says that as far as the North is concerned, what we have just witnessed was not a protest, but a way for some people to overthrow the government of President Bola Tinubu. It says there are some people writing a script for lawlessness, anarchy, and disorder. Do you agree with him, Prof?
I don't need to agree with him. He has his opinion. Maybe he has information that I do not. But what I want to ask is how those kind of protests could overthrow a constitutional government. It's not that easy. For that to happen, we need a total anarchy in the country. And what I saw on ground does not accord to that kind of conclusion. Its protest, the grievances are genuine. I mean, people are angry, people are hungry, people want to see action, people have suffered. But again, I don't see how you can overthrow the government just by going on the street and destroying public and private property. You are not organized. There is no leadership. I mean, I have studied revolutions and protests all over the world. The Chinese Revolution, the Russian Revolution, the Cuban Revolution, all those revolutions that have led to the overthrow of political regimes. The French Revolution, the American Revolution, the English Revolution, they did not happen just like that. Someone going on in modern day social media and saying, come out and protest, shout, shout. I don't see. No alternative was offered. We have a constitution on ground. You have not said how you are going to change the government except through constitutional means and so on. I mean, the level of preparations needed to overthrow governments, in my opinion, and looking at historical antecedents, is much more sophisticated than what we have seen. But of course, this is our country. We are given to hyperbole and exaggeration in some of how we approach things. I'm not saying that, yeah, the protests, they were certainly distracting. But what we have seen was brigandage and not an organized project designed to bring out a positive outcome. You don't just go on the street to overthrow government. We have seen it in some countries where there isn't adequate preparation, adequate leadership, adequate mobilization, and what you find in the end is chaos. And I don't think a regime change could have been achieved through the means, through what we saw on the 1st and 2nd of August, and maybe continuing in a lot of the places. We need a much more organized, much more sustained, much more ideologically coherent movement in order to achieve the kind of outcome you are talking about.
But Prof, you know, talking about grievances, I mean, they say a hungry man is an angry man. But some northern stakeholders have blamed this mass destruction, mass looting on endemic poverty, illiteracy, and hopelessness. I mean, would you tonight say the earlier northern governors addressed these challenges, the better for us as a nation?
Oh, no doubt about it. And of course, you see, poverty is not necessarily, in and of itself, it's not necessarily a cause of protest. Most of the poverty we're talking about is in the rural areas, okay? But there is also urban poverty, and it's more biting because the urban population is generally more enlightened on a general level, and so more able to articulate a grievance. But of course, the majority of our people are still rural. But there is poverty, there is lack of education, there is lack of economic opportunities, there is lack of adequate representation. It's not just people in positions of power at the federal or state level, but all levels of representation, whether you are talking of local government councillors, local government chairmen, state assemblies, state executive councils, and so on to the very top. There is a failure at every level to address the real grievances of our people. I mean, we see people living profligate life and so on to the detriment of the people. I have not seen the legislature, in particular, taking a proactive stand towards alleviating the living conditions, the existential challenges that face people. What I see are jamborees, concern with parks, and so on. I think the legislature and other representatives of people, organizations, non-governmental organizations need to do more in bringing to bear pressure on all levels of government, and especially representative government, to do more for the people, to get the people to ask questions rather than to submit to certain palliatives being thrown to them. I think the voter, the ordinary citizen, need to be more discerning and need to demand more accountability, need to demand more about the entrenchment of the principles of good governance say no to corruption, and so on. We need to interrogate more in a peaceful manner the behavior of law enforcement agencies. In addition, there is a lot more that can be done by almost everyone, community leaders, religious leaders, political leaders, and so on.
Absolutely. But Prof, because you've talked about the prevalence of ideology incoherence in the North, it reminded me of the conversation I had with Honorable Bashir Megudu last night, who constantly says it takes years to build, yet it's so fragile, it takes just a minute to destroy. And I keep wondering how much of this conversation do Northern stakeholders like you spread within the rural and urban communities in the region?
I want to say not adequately enough. I think all of us, we need a lot to do more in enlightening our people. Some of the problems in the society are entrenched, such as voter behavior, to get people to vote for ideas rather than for persons, to vote for the future rather than the present. I think we need to do a lot more. In my opinion, in the North in particular, we need to do more about exposing our people to modern education, in addition to the moral one. But we need to do a lot more so that our people will realize the potentials that have been wasted, the potentials in themselves. Get the girl child to school. For all you know, if she doesn't, you are wasting a medical doctor, you are wasting a nurse, you are wasting an engineer, and so on and so forth. It's tough, but it's not impossible. We need to do more. Have we been doing enough? I don't think so. I think we need to do more. Governors in particular will need to be interrogated more as to what is happening to all the allocations, what is happening to all the revenues that are accruing, either from anywhere or internally. And I think we can do a lot more about getting the elite to pay their dues, revenue, taxes, and so on. Because so far, the people that pay tax are a fraction of those that should. And it also applies to the amount. But it's not the tax as such. It is what you do with what you have. There isn't, in my opinion, adequate interrogation of those in charge of our revenues at all levels of government to see that they apply these revenues in ways that could change the fortune of people, in ways that could make a difference in health outcomes, education, rural infrastructure, empowerment, economic opportunities, banking, and so on. I think there is a lot more. I mean, something has been done, but it's far, far below expectation.
Absolutely, Prof. So, I mean, before we leave tonight, two more questions for you. You know, in developed countries, legal and ethical considerations surrounding laws on violent protests play an important role in shaping the outcomes and consequences of such actions. For you, have you gotten to a point where we must now enact laws governing violent protests and take them seriously?
No, I will not always be in a hurry to compare our situation with the developed countries. For God's sake, they did not achieve what they have in a day. There is a historic process to it. More than that, there is an economic context. What we need is to begin from the beginning. I don't think all this attempt to jump from 1 to complex, from 1 + 1 arithmetic to complex algebra will work. So, but what I want to see is beginning of mobilization. I want to see massive investment in education. I want to see massive investment in childhood and maternal health outcomes. I want to see a lot in getting our people to develop small businesses, to believe in themselves. I want to see an agricultural evolution, so that we move away from back-breaking technology to medium-scale technology, power tillers that will save labor, that will make agricultural production more efficient, easier. And I would like to see the beginning of organizing our people into cooperatives. I would like to see state government paying attention, enhancing the value chain of agriculture so that our people get a lot more than they are getting currently. Agro-processing industries, they are virtually collapsed. And so now I would like to see
Prof, because of our time, I'm happy you're here tonight. So I'd like to hear from the horse's mouth. Because before the protest, Arewa Consultative Forum released a statement and acknowledges as part of the existential challenges Mr. President must address. The forum says is the insensitive and ostentatious lifestyle and attitudes of Nigeria's elected representatives and other public officials, which has resulted in widespread anger for ordinary citizens. I mean, for me, I think this is a reiteration of the call for us to cut the cost of governance. Where does government start from?
Government should start from one, anti-corruption, two, directing public spending to key areas: education, health, infrastructure, economic opportunities, and agriculture. We need to do a lot. We need to do a lot more than the lip service we are seeing. We need to see allocation to real sectors. Like I said, one of the things I would like to see is the promotion of labor-saving devices in agriculture. This is the mainstay of our economy. I would like to see agro-processing at the local level, and I would like to see an expansion of the value chain so that our people will have a lot more income on their hands to decide what to do. And I would like to see public enlightenment on part of the people on what can be achieved, what is possible, because a lot of our people are too relaxed. A lot of our people are rather fatalistic. I think we need to get out of this and to draw attention to elite manipulation. This is very easy because we have a lot of public resources we can use. Media, social media, modern media, and so on. I think a lot more can be done with the little resources that are available.
All right. Thank you so much, Professor Mohammed Takob, about National Publicity Secretary, Arewa Consultative Forum. Thank you so much, Prof, for your earnest perspective on a conversation tonight. Thank you so much.
It's been my pleasure.